And you are?
Carla Javits. I'm the president of an organization called REDF. It was originally the Roberts Enterprise Development Fund, started by George Roberts of Kravis, Kohlberg and Roberts and his wife Leanne, because they were concerned about homelessness in the Bay Area, wanted to do something with a kind of business approach about it. And we're actually in the job creation business. We work with nonprofits that start businesses that are meant to employ people who otherwise couldn't get into the workforce, people who might have been incarcerated or got involved with gangs or are mentally ill or have been homeless. And these nonprofits start businesses meant to employ them and give them that first chance to get into the workforce.
Now this is indeed a very interesting and kind of unlikely blend of talents and interests here. Now, George Roberts is best known for a deal maker and so on. Can you give some sense as to how this element of his kind of persona came into being?
He really deeply believes in giving, and if you hear him talk about it, it's one of the greatest joys in his life, is giving back to the community. He believes in adding value with anything that he does, and he decided he wanted to do something charitable that he felt would not otherwise be done unless he got involved with it. And he also believes really deeply in the value of work. And I think that translates really well to what we've done, and frankly to the people who have gotten these jobs. You know, it's interesting, if you talk to them, people who have gotten jobs with these companies, and you ask them, you know, what's positive about that, the first thing they answer with is not that they now have a paycheck. The first thing they answer with is now they have a value to their lives, they have more self-respect, they have a community of peers and people that they can work with who depend on them, and they feel there's value and meaning to their lives. Of course, they're delighted to have income and a paycheck, but it's really, you know, the value of work is about, you know, kind of having your place in the world and a meaning in your life. And George Roberts really understands that, and he wanted to form a company that helped others who otherwise weren't going to have that chance to have it.
So we're here at SOCAP 08, a confab of great thinkers and some very substantial investors who are thinking in fundamental terms about really systemic change. From your perspective, what do you think are the key elements of this evolution that we're talking about? What's it going to take to bring about the sort of societal change that so many people here are imagining?
I might have a slightly different perspective on that than some of the people here who are really intensely focused on kind of how to create new vehicles in the capital markets to help create social good. To me, the excitement of this is perhaps something that's a little more old-fashioned but still hasn't been done yet at the level it should be. And that is, I think what it's going to take to really solve the problems that we have ahead of us is maybe more in the spirit of what Jed Emerson talks about, blended value. The issue really is, how do we use the best, the essential best of government, the for-profit private business sector, and the non-profit philanthropic sector working together, deliberately together, in order to address the major problems that we have in front of us. And even though that sounds maybe a little old-fashioned, and maybe we've been there, done that, the reality is that we really haven't. And I think there have been a few examples where that's been done, and frankly those examples have been tremendously successful. The affordable housing sector, you really see in a very deliberate way government, private sector investment, and nonprofits working together, and we've created millions and millions of affordable homes for people in America by doing that. And I think we still don't have enough examples of that, and if we really tried to address urban poverty, for example, which is what I'm interested in, and REDF is interested in, by taking the best of what business can do from a financial perspective, and also in terms of, you know, just its operational efficiencies and knowledge, what government can do, and what the nonprofit and philanthropic sector can do. I think that's the way we're going to really address these problems, and I think that's what's exciting to me about this forum, because it's really bringing people from the business community who perhaps haven't been as fully engaged in these issues into this in a very serious way, and I think that's going to change the conversation and hopefully change the result.
So yesterday I was chatting with Jed a little bit, and to my way of thinking, Jed co-authored really the seminal paper in this field about capitalism 3.0, and we were talking about some of the elements of this infrastructure that people are talking about. The markets, the capital markets, and the new financial instruments, and so on. And then, you know, I threw out some ideas on this that I've been involved with. And I said, Jed, how are we going to do this? And I said, you think any of the major foundations would be interested? And he says, nope, it's too big for them. He says there's too much inertia there. Do you agree with that? And if that's the case, then how are we going to, you know, find a way to make this happen?
Well, again, I mean, not to be repetitive, but, you know, honestly, I think that where that transparency, that spirit of innovation, willingness to take chances, to try to do things differently, I think where I've seen that come from is when people come together from different elements, from different sectors, when we're comfortable and with people who are just like us, from just the same culture and organization and approach and outlook that we are, we're less inspired to take those kinds of chances and to try new things and to do things differently. And I think it's when we're together with others who perhaps we're not as comfortable with and are telling us something different than what we think or what we may have done, that we begin to see what those opportunities are, and frankly we begin to feel the pressure to behave differently and to do more. And so I think it's in the coming together of the three sectors that we're going to start to see action, not from one sector leading the way.
So building on this idea of creating cross-sector partnerships, how's that going to happen? Who's going to take the lead in that?
You know, honestly, I think that can come from almost any end of the spectrum. But you know, the reality is, it comes from those organizations or individuals who feel most urgently pressed to do something about these problems. And sometimes that's a person or an organization from any one of those three sectors. I mean, motivations are very wildly different. You know, depends on many things. But I think the key there is that it takes an individual or a set of individuals within some entity to make this choice and to choose to begin to forge those kinds of relationships in a very deliberate way. And again, I think what's very interesting, and I haven't fully thought this through just with the recent turmoil in the markets, is that in some sense there's been a reluctance to enter into these partnerships across these sectors, because there's a fear about blurring the lines. You know, if you're a company in the for-profit arena, you're supposed to be making money, and that's the focus, and that's where your bottom line is. If you're in the nonprofit sector, you shouldn't be about making money. You should just be about making money. And if you're in the government, you know, you have to be widely accountable to the public, and you're sort of overstressed with all the pressures that are on you, and you're, you know, taking risk is really anathema. You know, that's kind of been the traditional sense. But boy, I mean, could we ever imagine a a Republican president, a Republican administration wholeheartedly embracing the notion of buying shares of banks in the United States of America. Even if it's a temporary measure, it's a means to an end. And I think just the breakthrough in thinking that results from that, to think that, well, perhaps there are means to the end that are different than what we've thought about in the past, and perhaps it's worthwhile in that sense to blur some of these boundaries and to think about what that might mean in a realistic sense. I don't think that it means that a for-profit company is not going to have profit as its bottom line, or that a non-profit is not going to have, social good as its bottom line. But that in and of itself doesn't preclude each of those entities working together for some common good, again, bringing the interests and the approaches and the tools that they have to the table, and figuring out how they work together to achieve a common end. And maybe there'll be more of that now that we've seen that happen at such a broad scale in this economy.
Just one final question here. Do you think what's happening on Wall Street with this financial crisis is sufficiently scary that it might prove a wake-up call to start to catalyze some of these changes that we've been talking about?
I don't know. I think, on the other hand, that when things like this happen, people tend to hunker down and become conservative about their choices and their decisions, so I don't know that in and of itself is enough to galvanize this kind of focus on what's kind of social good, if you will. But I do think that in times of turmoil, and this is certainly going to be a time of turmoil for the next several years, in government, in nonprofits, in business, the times of turmoil are good times to bring forth new ideas, that people are not, in a sense, as wedded to what once worked. So I think if we can bring these things forward in a coherent way that doesn't seem so risky that it drives people off, that this actually is going to be a good time for those of us who really care deeply about these issues to bring them forward.
Well, on that positive note, I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.